Hey everyone, welcome to Blackberry and Honey. Blackberry Honey, sorry. There's no and. My brain keeps saying there is. From what I understand, this is essentially just a visual novel type thing or something. So, really, I don't know anything else about it. Except for lesbians, supposedly. And I'm like, why didn't this go on sale during, Pride Month? Back. But it's on sale now, at least on PlayStation for $5 something. Oh god. I don't like this screen because it's hard to tell what it's on comparatively. Let's see. Okay, there is no voice acting, I'm assuming. So let's just get on it. I think that will start. The night sky was dark. A few stars twinkled up above, just tiny pinpricks, like split granules of sugar. The stars looked so small and far away, it tugged at something within the young woman's heart. Was this the same sky her family could see? Were these stars the same stars? Was the moon the same moon? She didn't know. She hadn't seen her family in so long. But she couldn't think about that now. If she did, she was sure she would cry, and she didn't want to do that. She refused. Bum bum bum. She'd always been stubborn. That was how she'd ended up in this mess. The girl had been riding in the back of a horse-drawn cab for upwards of 14 hours, from 7 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. Her legs, which had been cramped up in a space far too small for them for far too long, hurt. Even as she stood there, doing nothing more strenuous than simply existing, her body trembled. It felt like a mischievous imp was inserting needles into the backs of her legs. She could hear in the distance the sound of horses' hooves striking against the ground. The carriage was lurching away beneath the cover of the night. There was nowhere else for her to go. Nowhere for her to run. All she could do was stare at the wrought iron gates before her and the large, imposing house beyond. Blah. It was worlds apart from the girl's home in Liverpool, which she had shared for many years with her mother and 2 sisters. 3 sisters now, given the recent birth of the youngest, Alice. Little Alice. But she would never be able to see Alice grow up. She swallowed, her throat convulsed. So this was to be her new place of residence, but not her home. She could never call it her home. There was something horribly austere about the place, not helped by the sinister shadows that enveloped everything. The trees in the vast, expansive garden were tall and skinny. They stood sentinel, their bows waving in the breeze, almost like ghosts. Skeletal soldiers. Bly, with its crumbling walls and darkened windows, seemed like the kind of place that would have a ghost story or two. It had existed long enough. Built in the early part of the 17th century, the girl had heard. How many ghosts lurked within those walls? Soon she would find out. Her carpet bag was bounced in the crook of her arm. It was small and had a dent in the side impossible to remove. She knew because she had tried. All her worldly belongings were stowed inside that single bag. A few set of clothes, a hairbrush, an old battered volume of Robinson Crusoe. That was all. There were no toiletries, no jewelry, not even a second pair of shoes. She couldn't afford such luxuries. She was only a maid at Bly, working in the service of the Leonard family. She'd never met the Leonard family before, but the Pickering's housekeeper, Miss Mary Ann, had told her they were not so very bad. There was the mistress Lady Louisa Leonard, her husband Lord Albert Leonard, who was often away on business trips, and then there was their sole daughter, and heir to the family fortune, Lady Constance Leonard. She could handle that much, couldn't she? She hoped so. She had to. She didn't have a choice. She drew in a deep breath. The cold air tugged at her hair and her skirts. Her fingers trembled. They were starting to turn blue. God dang, how cold is it, woman? Wear some gloves! The wind seemed to suck the air out of her lungs. It felt like a cold hand was pressing against her larynx. Why? You could have just said throat. But okay. She choked on her own breath. I've seen people do that, so I will accept that. I've seen people choke on air. Her eyes stung, but she wouldn't cry. She already told herself she wouldn't, instead trying to gather what little scraps of self-confidence she still possessed. You can do this. There's no turning back now. Lorena Waugh? I don't know how to say that. Only 19 years of age, clutched her bag to her chest and straightened her back. She wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Just how bad could Bly possibly be?
Blackberry honey, your drops seal our fate. Deep in your purity, love germinates. Lilies white, fill my soul up with tender light, and roses so red, bloom therein with delight. Indigo, violets like moonbeams so high, and noble in color my sky. Forget me not, oh sweet starlight above. Carry my wishes, my dreams, and my love. Past the gardens deep and the foxgloves reach, till the hidden lotus you reach. Through afternoons and red twilights, our cadence is like every green jasmines embracing their light. The essence, the nectar that's weaving our song, guide my heart to the place I belong. Once more through the echoing songs, our flowers hold strong to the roots of this everlasting bond. Oh, blackberry honey, your strands of pure gold, make this love sweeter 20,000 fold. Deep in your purity, love we behold.
The 16th of March, Wednesday. Yes, good. When Lorena opened her eyes, she was met with the same dismal sight that had greeted her every morning for the last 4 months. A gray ceiling peppered here and there with ominous cracks, heralding the inevitable day when it would one day collapse under its own weight. For the time being, however, this is where Lorena was to sleep. Her very own bedroom in Bly. Not that it was her bedroom, of course. It was a small, tightly packed attic she shared with 5 of her fellow mates. Isabel, Pauline, Ada, Effie, and the Swiss-born Lisette. I don't know. The other maids were arising, stretching, and yawning, complaining. Isabel and Pauline were the worst for it. They always complained. Lorena supposed it was very English, in a way, but she rather wished they wouldn't. My head feels so thick. Must mean there's rain coming. It always bloody rains around here. Wouldn't be England without it. I like the rain. Good on you, Effie. Good morning, Lorena. I'm sorry, but the way her boobs are every single time so far has bothered me for some reason. I don't know why. Lorena stretched and sat up in bed. Thin sheets pulled around her body. The sheets were stained and rarely offered any warmth, not even in the spring. Still, Lorena supposed it was better than nothing. Look on the bright side. That was what her mother would say. There's always a silver lining. Said silver lining being Lorena's fellow maid, Ada. Ada was rather young, only a year or so older than Lorena, and the two maids had formed something of an alliance. They were both the oldest sisters in large families, and they both worked in order to support their siblings. The only difference was Ada had 3 younger brothers. Lorena had 3 sisters. Good morning, Ada. Good? What's so good about it exactly? It's just a figure of speech. I don't care what it is. It's blinking ridiculous. Blinking? Okay. Here. Does anybody want to wake up at 5 o'clock? Maybe masochist. I must be a bloody masochist working here. My fingers are shot to pieces. They're shaking. I'll never be able to light the fires like this. Oh, don't talk about fires. I'm frigid. Last night was cold. You think that was cold? That was nothing compared to the winters in Andermatt. And in case you hadn't realized, Lizette, you're not in Switzerland anymore. Oh yes, how I miss it. The sun rising over the Alps is truly a sight to behold. I wish you could all see it. That does sound rather lovely. They say the air in the Alps is very good for the circulation. I'm sure it do you wonders. Do you really think so? Oh, she's such a cute little one. Oh, I like her. Oh, yes, I know so. Unfortunately, there are no Alps to behold here. Get your head out of the clouds, Lottie, or I'll shove it up a chimney. You Englishwomen are so very witty. Witty was the last word Lorena would have used in conjunction with Isabel, but she decided to keep that to herself. Unlike me. With a small yawn, the young maid stretched her arms above her head. She was unsure what time it was exactly, but it must have been around 5 o'clock in the morning. Look, you have already stated, why would anyone want to get up at 5 o'clock? We know it's around 5 already. Mornings came for the servants of Bly several hours earlier than they did for Lady Leonard and her privileged offspring, Lady Constance. The servants had to wake up at unforgiving hours before even the sun had started to rise. Depending on where you live, 5 o'clock, it's trying to rise. It was their lot in life to skirtle around soundlessly, creeping through the shadowy hallways, opening the shutters, polishing the fireplace, dusting the mantelpieces, and so on and so forth. It never ended. From 5 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, the maids of Bly were fully occupied with their work. There wasn't a single moment where they could sit down and rest. Maybe that's why Isabel and Pauline, who had been maids for longer than the others, were so snappish and irritable. I mean, I'm irritable working at my job, so I can understand it. It didn't help that the head butler, Grant Lester, was such a stickler for the rules. He was incredibly strict, perhaps more so than Lady Leonard herself. Hey, Lorena. Pauline, who was already dressed, gave Lorena a disparaging look. Were you planning on getting dressed at some point, or are you just going to sit there? Lorena scrambled to her feet, throwing the covers to one side. She had been so immersed in her idle fancies that she had quite forgotten. Pauline sniggered. So did Isabel. I'm sorry, I'm getting ready right away. Don't apologize to us. Apologize to Mr. Lester when you're late coming downstairs. Again. I'm getting dressed right now. I am. Do you want us to applaud? We shan't wait for you, you know. Let's go. We'll all be old women by the time she's finished. But, that includes you too, Ada. Alright. Sorry, Lorena. Don't apologize to her, stupid. If she gets scolded, she'll deserve it. On her own head be it. I understand. I'm sorry. And you, Lottie, are you coming or are you still thinking about Switzerland? I am always thinking of Switzerland, but I do not want to be scolded by Mr. Lester. He is so very strict. Lizette gave Lorena an apologetic smile. I will see you later, Lorena. If you ever have cause to feel down, just think of the Alps. I will. Not that Lorena knew what the Alps looked like. She didn't know very much, really. She'd never had cause to travel beyond the borders of her own home country. Being a maid, she'd probably never get the chance. Her future was already set in stone. Later that morning, Is this the one you wanted? Lady Constance made a show of pondering, index finger tapping against her lower lip before she shook her head. Look, they had bras back then, or some type of supportive garment. And I think that might be why it's bothering me. Or would the clothes not lay like that normally? I think that's part of the problem. The way the clothes are laying. Anyway, could be stylistic, so we're just gonna leave it. No, that is obviously not good enough. The leaves have been eaten by caterpillars. Look, I can't see anything wrong with it myself. Then you are blind. Or perhaps you're just being a little madame. Lorena muttered mutinously under her breath. She knew she wasn't supposed to speak ill of her social betters, though had Lady Constance been one of Lorena's younger sisters, Lorena would have lost her temper already. Well, if you don't like it, I can always look for another. See to it that you do. I could not stand having a display of withered roses in my bedroom. I bet you couldn't. What was that? Oh, nothing, just talking to myself. Well, don't. Mother says it is a sign of madness. No, it's fine if you talk to yourself, long as you don't answer yourself. Perhaps she was mad, Lorena mused. She must have been to take Lady Constance's abuse. If she'd had 1 ounce of sense, she would have slapped Lady Constance right across her smug little face, 12 years old or no. In fact, it was precisely because Lady Constance was 12 years old that she needed disciplining. If nobody gave her a stern talking to, Lorena feared Lady Constance would become quite an unpleasant person when she got older. Even more unpleasant than she was already. If Lady Constance had been a sweet, innocent child who enjoyed tucking herself into small corners and reading books, she would have been a pleasure to serve. Lorena would have gone out of her way to make life as comfortable as possible for this imaginary Constance. The real Constance, however, was not so lovely. Real little girls never were. Though they were depicted as sweet, delicate angels in plays and poems, the reality was rather different. Now, maid, try to find me some roses that look nice. It shouldn't be too hard. Joe has strict orders to only let the most beautiful roses bloom in this garden. Yes, miss. But that was easier said than done. If the roses within Lorena's immediate vicinity were not acceptable, for whatever make-believe reason Lady Constance had dreamt up, she would need to search harder. What about the roses that were further back in the thicket? Lorena began to search, brushing some of the roses to one side. The flowers were undeniably beautiful, their pink petals as soft as velvet, but the thorns were numerous, their sharp and pointed, just waiting to spill blood. Lorena shied away like a reluctant pony, her fingertips trembling. The thorns promised pain, and she had no desire to cause herself unnecessary grief. Lady Constance, meanwhile, was unsympathetic. The little girl tutted and sighed and tapped her right foot against the ground, her brown eyes rolling about inside her head the whole while. This should be easy, maid. I don't understand why you're taking so long. It would be easy, Lorena wished she could retort, if somebody was not hell-bent on making this so complicated. But of course she didn't say that, not even under her breath. It wouldn't have been worth it. Is this rose to your liking, miss? No, that isn't good enough at all. Then this one? No! I only want the best roses in my room. Anything less would be an insult, unless... Are you trying to insult me? Of course not, miss. Then take this more seriously. You are a maid, aren't you? Yes, miss. Then you should do everything within your powers to keep me happy. Yes, miss. Start doing your job properly. I ordered you to pick me the best roses, and that's what I expect. The best roses are the ones right at the back, so you need to look a little deeper. But, miss, what, didn't you hear what I just said? I gave you an order. I realize that, but... Are those ears of yours just for show? You were listening to me, weren't you? Yes, I understand. You understand what? I understand, miss. If you understand, start looking. I won't leave until you've picked at least one acceptable rose. Yes, miss. Well, she's fine. Left with no other alternative, the young maid continued her search amongst the flower beds. Her arms trembled, so too did her eyelashes. Her body was tense and taut. One wrong move and she would lacerate her skin. And not just one, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 places. Then she would start swearing under her breath and blinking tears out of her eyes. Lorena didn't want to show that much of a weak side of her character to Lady Constance. She could hardly bear the thought. But that was probably why Lady Constance liked picking on her. Lorena had too much pride, but she got flustered easily and couldn't always stand up for herself. She wasn't like the parlor maid. She would never be like the parlor maid, not that she wanted to be. The parlor maid was a cold woman, aloof and distant, who only spoke to Lorena to pass malicious comments. Dang! What do you do to make her angry? That's a big question. Her barbed statements slid beneath the skin more effectively than 1,000 thorns from 1,000 roses. The parlor maid's words hurt, and Lorena didn't even know why. It wasn't as though Lorena wanted her approval. She didn't like her. She didn't like her at all. Why was it then that Lorena's throat felt dry whenever she saw her, and her stomach fluttered, and she couldn't look her in the eye, and she... Ah! Lorena grasped her chalk and stumbled away from the rosebush, clasping her hand to her chest. 3 wounds crisscrossed against the back of her right hand. 2 of them were shallow, superficial, oozing droplets of crimson blood no bigger than pinheads, but the other was far bigger. This cut had cleaved a chunk of flesh out of her hand, stripping back the skin like a roll of wallpaper. Lorena stared at her then the ground. There were splotches of blood, her blood, just inches away from her right foot. She shook her head. She felt sick. Blood didn't often make Lorena feel faint, but there was quite a lot of it. She didn't want to smear her apron. And to make matters worse, there was a thorn embedded in the back of her hand, emerged from the open wound like a piece of thread through the eye of a needle. Don't bleed all over the flower beds, idiot. What do you think you're doing? No, don't tell me. I know the answer. You weren't thinking at all. You maids really are useless. Smack her. I'm for smacking her officially. My, how did you do that to yourself? It was an accident. Well, I should hope you didn't do it on purpose. That'd be quite the foolish thing to do. Lorena glowered. Her cheeks flustered. The parlor maid was always cool, calm, and irritatingly aloof. She was haughty as a cat and constantly seemed to look down on others, but she always accompanied her blatant disregard with a small smile. Lorena never felt quite herself when she was in the company of this unsettling woman. Her gaze made Lorena tremble. It was almost as if everything within Lorena had been misaligned by an inch or so her skeleton no longer fit neatly inside her body. Truthfully, Lorena had been hoping to avoid the parlor maid during this sad state of affairs. In a more perfect world, she would have retreated to the kitchen, cleaned off the blood off her hands, beneath the skin, and pulled out sink and pulled out the offending thorn with minimal fuss, no fanfare at all. That was what she wanted. But life was never that simple. The parlor maid had been in the kitchen already, and Lorena had only realized once she had crossed the threshold, and their eyes had met, and it had been too late to turn about and leave. Why the parlor maid was in the kitchen and not in the parlor, as her title suggested, was a mystery. It appeared, though Lorena had no intentions of asking her, that she was in the middle of preparing various tea things, arranging several willow pattern teacups and a matching teapot on a tea tray. Was Lady Leonard having guests then? It seemed as good as a guest as any. Say, what do you want? I was wondering if I could take a look at your hand. And why do you want to do that? Oh dear, so suspicious. I just wanted to know if I could be of any assistance. You look like you are in pain. I don't know why you care. I'm just trying to show an interest. There's nothing terrible about that, is there? Do you think I'm terrible? Lorena swallowed. She hadn't expected the sudden inquiry. Why was the parlor maid trying to put words into her mouth? I never said that. But stop being foolish and let me help you. Can I expect to perform satisfactory first aid on yourself? Not with one hand. It can't be done. But you have work to do. I always have work to do. It can wait. But Lady Leonard won't mind if her tea is a minute or two late, I'm sure. She'd mind if I was the one who had to deliver it. But you are not, and I am. And it is different. That's right, it is different, isn't it? Now don't look so down. I'm just stating the facts. There's no need to sulk. I'm not sulking. Yeah, you are. Not anymore. You're angry with me, aren't you? Lorena opened her mouth, closed it again. Her face turned even redder. The parlor maid laughed. You're so easy to read, Lori. Lori? That's right, Lori. Nobody calls me that. I just did. I wish you wouldn't. We can't all have what we want. I'm aware of that, thank you very much. Lorena frowned. So the parlor maid knew her name, though she insisted on using a silly nickname for whatever reason, but Lorena didn't know hers. Maybe she should have done, considering she had been blind for 4 months, but the parlor maid's name was strange and foreign. It was difficult to get her tongue around. Why should she need to know her name anyway? They weren't friends. Lorena wanted nothing to do with the insufferable woman. But all the same... Sorry, I got a trophy. I was just looking at it. What are you doing? Taking care of you like I said I would. But why? Because I don't believe you can take care of yourself. That's quite an assumption to make, and not a very polite one either. Why should I worry about being polite? I'm polite enough to Lady Leonard, though I don't think she deserves it. One gets awfully tired of minding their manners all the time. You agree with me, don't you? That's beside the point. So you do agree. How lovely. Now hold still. The parlor maid's hands were smooth and soft, and her fingers were slender. They were the hands of an artisan. Now those hands were holding Lorena's. Lorena felt herself shivering, and not just because of the pain. Her right hair was still bleeding, though gently. The bloodshed was so slow and lackadaisical, it was almost relaxing. What is this? I do like the music, though. Now, what is this? The parlor maid's lips were inches away from the shell of Lorena's ear. Her breath tickled. Is this a thorn? Lorena nodded dumbly. How did you do this to yourself? Did you fall into a rose bush? It wasn't intentional. Then you were pushed? You could say that, I suppose. Was this one of Lady Constance's whims? Yes, she wanted me to pick some roses for her, but I got hurt in the process? Evidently. Parlor maid clicked her tongue against the roof of her mouth. Lady Constance doesn't care for flowers, you know. She's an exceedingly careless girl. Dang, look, she was bad enough before, now she's even worse. I'm aware of that. Then why did you go along with her selfish request? She was only trying to make you miserable, and it seems she was successful. Look what has happened to you. What you let happen. I beg your pardon? You heard what I said? I did, but you couldn't have meant it. Why not? I didn't let this happen. I didn't want to cut myself. What? Lorena opened her and closed her mouth, but no words came out. When she needed them the most, they abandoned her. I see. No response is forthcoming. How disappointing. Anyway, let me attend to this. I never asked you to, but I will, because if I don't, it will get infected and you will get sick. Fine, go ahead. This will probably hurt. I hope you're prepared. Do your worst. Why is this gotta be competitive or something? Why does this feel so competitive? Oh, was that a challenge? Take it however you want. I believe that is your role, my little Lori. What do you... Lorena jumped. A sharp burst of pain flared up in her afflicted finger, as though a match had been struck against it. Then all of a sudden, there we go, that should take care of it. The parlor maid pulled the thorn free. Blood began to trickle from the cut. It looked brighter than ever, so red it was almost dizzying. Almost. Now let's get you cleaned up. Lorena followed, obedient as a child, as the parlor maid led her to the ceramic sink. There she turned on the tap and a steady stream of water began to flow. This might sting a bit, but you can handle it, can't you? I thought so. You're a big girl. The parlor maid's small smile did not abate, even as Lorena's fingers spasmed beneath the water. Lorena glared at her beneath her eyelashes. Her shoulders trembled. You... Yes, what is it, dear? Lorena gritted her teeth together. The words bubbling up within her breast were treacherous. She had never been able to say such things to Lady Constance or Lady Leonard for fear of losing her job, but she could say them to the parlor maid. The parlor maid was the only one Lorena could take her anger out on. I don't like you at all. Oh dear, how sad. The parlor maid sighed. How could you say that when I'm trying to help you? You don't want to help, you just want to gloat. I think you're misunderstanding something, my little Lori. What? Unlike you, I don't do things unless I want to. But you can't live life like that. You're supposed to be a maid. Answering the whims of others is your purpose in life. I will decide my own purpose in life, thank you. Now hold still. Lorena's blood continued to splash against the white ceramic basin of the sink. The water soon washed it away, muting the color until no more trace remained. Well, that settles that. The parlor maid took a neat step backwards, running a hand through her dark hair. The action seemed carefully calculated somehow, and it made Lorena feel uneasy. Everything about the older woman was unsettling. And don't worry, there's no need to thank me. I wasn't going to, and I still can't stand you. I know that only too well. If you cared for me in any way, you might have tried to remember my name. Oh well. For future reference, it's Talwa. I don't know what language that's supposed to be, so... Talwa? Talwa. Not that you care. Because I don't know what country she's supposed to be from, and, like, my brain jumps to, like, Asian. The 2nd of April, Saturday. I don't remember what the last day they said it was, so... Several weeks passed, and Lorena had been trying to avoid Lady Constance as much as possible. Lady Constance had always been petty and vindictive, but she seemed even more so as of late, and Lorena didn't want to get caught up in her silly temper tantrums. And Lady Constance wasn't the only one Lorena had been skirting around. There was also the parlor maid, Tauha. Her name was Tauha. Now Lorena wanted to remember it. She'd far rather forget her. Lorena didn't want to remember how her fingers had trailed gently across her palm, or the soft whisper of her voice, or the strangely intoxicating scent of orange peels and bergamot that clung to her skin and hair. And she certainly didn't want to remember her withering stare or derisive tone. Sure you don't want to remember. Look what has happened to you. What you let happen. How stuck up, like you're so perfect. Lorena grit her teeth together so hard the enamel threatened to crack and turned over in her bed. The springs of her mattress creaked. The icy air nipped Lorena's fingers and toes, making them twitch. As usual, her blanket offered no warmth. Oh, Andermatt, could it really be? Lizalette was curled on her side, arms wrapped about her pillow. Her long flaxen hair split across her bed. Some of it trailed into the floorboards, Rapunzel-like. She was dreaming about the Alps again. She was always dreaming about the Alps. At least some things never changed. Lorena watched her, picking out Lizelette's delicate features in the dark, her pale eyelashes, her snub nose, her pursed lips, her long, long hair. Lorena could imagine the children of Andermatt brushing Lizelette's hair for her, then threading it through with flowers, orchids, violets, and delicate purple primulas, like something from a fairy tale. She really did look like a princess. The other maids, meanwhile, were slightly less flattering in their slumber. Pauline snored, Isabel shifted, perpetually restless. Effie had a tendency to lay so silent and still, like some kind of wax effigy. Lorena always feared she had died. Oh my God. Ada, meanwhile, the young maid had weak lungs, and her soft, gentle snores were cracked and hissy. Her breathing was labored during the day, but it was even worse at night. She sounded less like a young girl than an old man. Lorena often felt sorry for Ada. Walking up a single flight of stairs was often enough to make her double over, gasping for air that her lungs seemed determined to reject. It could always be worse, Lorena mused. She could be Ada. At least she wasn't Ada. Tao did not sleep in the small, drafty attic room, which was termed the virgin quarters by the unpleasantly snickering footman. Tao was unique, worlds apart from the plain, boring English maids of Bly, or European in Lizelette's case. Tawa's skin was a touch darker, her irises strikingly green, and her hair was black and silky. A rare flower surrounded by weeds. She was too special to mix in with the other maids, too important to befriend them, too aloof to even try. Ah, Mama, Papa, Daisy too, I missed you so. Tawa was graceful and composed, while Lorena was awkward and flustered easily. Lorena couldn't imagine Tawa ever allowing Lady Constance to boss her around. But that didn't mean she could treat Lorena so poorly. Tawa had handled Lorena carefully, like she was some kind of precise instrument, yet she had insulted her at the same time. It was confusing. Andermatt, my Andermatt, it has been years and yet. What kind of name was Tawa, anyway? Lorena had never heard of it before. She couldn't understand it either. If she couldn't understand the name, how on earth could she ever hope to understand the woman attached to it? Lorena didn't want to understand her. She hated her, didn't she? Lorena bit down on her lower lip and turned over once more. She didn't care how tangled her hair got. She turned again and again and again, but no matter how she tried, she couldn't get comfortable. Just when her eyelids were starting to feel heavy, she could almost imagine herself slipping into the land of slumber. I never wish to leave. I cannot. This is where I belong. Lisette chose that moment to declare rather loudly for a sleep-talker her continued allegiance to her beloved Andermatt. Lorena's left eye twitched. Fine, fine, I'm getting up. Oh, Andermatt. Shut up. Lorena sat up, her hair in a disheveled mess, and glared at Lizelette. Even in her sleep, Lizelette looked perfect. Her face glowed with health, and her flaxen hair was full of life. Maybe it was because of Andermatt. If Lorena had been born amongst the mountains, and had spent her youth picking flowers and milking cows, perhaps her cheeks would have permanent roses too. Then again, maybe not. Lorena sighed and massaged her temples with her fingers. She needed to talk to somebody, but who? Everyone was asleep. Then in that case, a letter. Yes, that seemed like a sensible solution. Lorena missed her mother. She missed her a good deal. She missed her sisters too, Ethel and Mary. She even missed little Alice, who had only been 2 years old the last time Lorena had set eyes on her. She would be 5 now. They need to more carefully note the passage of time, because I swear they acted like not much time has passed. Just a few months and then a few weeks. Oh well, whatever. Time really did fly. The 3rd of April, Sunday. And one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled. Warmed, was it? To Lorena's frigid, frostbitten ears, that was a pleasant idea indeed. The maid shifted on the pew, her fingers linked together on her lap. The wooden pew was icy and seemed to bleed all the heat from her thighs, though they were pressed together. It was miraculous, really, that St. Mary's Church was so bitterly cold all the year round, despite the large amount of human bodies crammed into it. But perhaps the culprit behind the pervading chill was not the weather after all. It was the venerable vicar, one Reverend Marner. When he surveyed the congregation, peering at them with the intensity of one trying to discern the oxygen within the air, all heat seemed to evaporate from the room. His eyes were such a striking pale blue, Lorena was half tempted to believe they contained within them shards of ice. Notwithstanding, you give them not those things which are needful to the body. What doth it profit? What doth it profit indeed? Lorena wasn't entirely sure, but Reverend Marner made this rhetorical question seem of the utmost concern. The Reverend paused once more. He was fond of inserting large pauses into his sermons, to let his eyes sweep amongst the assembled men and women in their Sunday finest. Not that Lorena, being a maid, had any Sunday finest. Her maid's outfit, supplied by the Leonards, was the most sophisticated item of clothing she owned. Consequently, that was what she was wearing. Lorena knew some of the more esteemed men and women of the St. Mary's parish derided her for her choice in wardrobe, but she had little else to choose from. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. But by goodness, the church really was cold. Lorena wasn't the only one attempting and failing to cease her squirming. Ada was in a similar predicament. She was shifting here and there to encourage the circulation in her legs. The maids of Blythe sat together during the service. Ada was on the one side of Lorena, Pauline on the other. Isabel, Lizette, and the ever-inscrutable Effie made up the rest of Blythe's pretty maids. As that might be expected, they were all sitting in a row. Not that Pauline was particularly pretty. She'd always reminded Lorena of a horse. A man may say, "Thou hast faith, and I have works." Lady Leonard and Lady Constance were also in attendance, though they weren't seated with the maids. The maids of Bly were relegated to pews near the back of the church, while the upper echelons of society were seated at the front. Should the apocalypse truly occur, Lorena had no doubts the rich and the beautiful would be ushered up to the pearly gates first. That was just how things seemed to work. Shew me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. But there was one servant of the Leonard household who was conspicuously absent, Tawa. Though Bly's other servants, all 23 of them, from the cook to the valet to the coachman, attended the Sunday service religiously, Tawa never once seen fit to make an entrance. Lorena doubted whether that woman had placed so much as a single toe over the threshold of St. Mary's before, but she was not particularly distraught over her absence. It made it easier to focus. Whenever Tawa was around, Lorena's heart started to flutter. Her cheeks flushed. She found herself feeling quite unlike her usual self. The letter residing in her pocket, folded neatly in place within the confines of a brown envelope, was proof enough. Thou believest that there is one God. That woman was no Christian. One merely had to look at her to gauge that much. Her peculiar skin, her peculiar eyes, her long black hair, there was something decidedly unsettling about the woman. Even more so than the tone of Reverend Marner's voice. But for whatever reason, Lorena couldn't stop thinking about her. I'm still not used to the church services of you English. What, was it much different in Andermatt? Well, Lizette pondered, tapping one finger against her lower lip. It was more or less the same, I suppose, but I rather miss hearing stories about Saint Verena. Who is he? Oh my, I see your English are not familiar with Saint Verena at all. I'm sorry, I haven't heard of them. It doesn't ring a bell. Saint Verena is a Swiss saint. She used to be a nurse, and she devoted her life to the spiritual and physical care of young girls. Apparently she was also very pretty. Lizette beamed and clapped her hands together. I too wish to live a pure and devout life as a good Christian, just like my favorite saint. You have a favorite saint? Surely if one wants to be a good Christian, you shouldn't pick favorites. Oh, I know. Papa said much the same, but I can't help myself. She is depicted in a stained glass window in the Church of St. Peter and Paul in my Underbot, and she looks so very kind and benevolent, not to mention her hair. So you like the Swiss saint solely for her looks? That's awfully shallow, Lottie. It isn't shallow, at least not entirely. There's nothing wrong with liking pretty girls. Exactly, I support any saint who concerns herself with the welfare of maidens like ourselves. Sadly, I'm a woman, not a maiden. I think I'm a touch too old for your holy Saint Verena. Saint Verena would not discriminate, I am sure. All right, you're starting to sound like a saint yourself. Saint Lottie. I think Lizette might make a nice saint. She's nice enough, but I doubt she can perform any miracles. None of us can. You know, I wouldn't mind being a saint. I've always wanted to peer on a stained glass window. You would look very nice. You think? It would suit you better than me. Now, pride is a deadly sin, Lottie. What, really? I think so. You won't be going to heaven with that attitude. Oh my, I did not wish to cause any offense. The maids of light continued in this manner as they walked through the streets of Ellesmere, their feet striking against the ground. Lorena's skirts swirled around her ankles, the letter inside her pocket rustling with each step. The letter. Lorena had been taken in by Lizette. She'd almost forgotten. Oh, do excuse me. There's something I need to do before I return. Something you need to do? That sounds rather suspicious. I promise it won't take a minute. If you're late by so much as 30 seconds, you'll be in for the high jump. Mr. Lester runs a very tight ship, you know. You should know. You're the one who always gets in trouble. I'm aware. I'll be as quick as I can. Not that it really concerns us, but... The corners of Pauline's lips formed an unpleasant smirk. If you're late back, Lorena, we won't cover for you. I know. And so the gaggle of maids left Lorena behind. Run, girl, run to get your shit done. Thoughts of Tawa, or Tilly, as Lorena had oh so cleverly termed her in her letter, weighed heavily upon the young maid's mind. She had to get a second opinion. It had been impossible to think about anything but the older woman during the service. So consumed by Tawa she had been and still was, she failed to realize where she was walking. Ow! Until it was too late. Lorna recalled holding a hand to her cheek. Her jaw hurt. Had she just quite literally walked into someone? My, you should watch where you're going, dear. You might cause somebody some serious harm. Nothing to say. Cat got your tongue? Lorna flustered and glanced down at the ground. It didn't help the woman she'd walked into was rather pretty. She had brown hair that put Lorena in the mind of chestnuts. Her attire, meanwhile, was much like that of a schoolteacher, with a white blouse and a long, sensible skirt. She didn't look too dissimilar from Miss Amy, Lady Constance's governess. Neither was she alone. That hair, though. A blonde girl with a disagreeable scowl stood by the woman's side, her hands planted firmly against her hips. Upon closer inspection, Lorena realized that she knew these women. She'd never spoken to them before, but she had seen them in passing on more than one occasion. They frequented the Sunday services at St. Mary's Church. It was a small world after all, and Ellesmere was smaller than most. A smirk crept the older woman's lips. She surveyed Lorena with undisguised amusement. Now that I look at you properly, you are rather lovely. But lovely? I am? Indeed, I am quite fond of soft, shy girls. Oh, please. Your kind are so very fun to play with, you know. Do give it a rest. Sure, girl rolled her eyes empathetically in the manner of one who must have practiced the gesture a good deal before a full-length mirror. You should restrict your playing solely to the violin. I know, but when faced with a sweet young thing like this, how can I resist? You'll have to do your best. You know what Reverend Marner says. Pits of hellfire and eternal damnation, yes, I know. Honestly, you need to start leaving pretty girls alone. Boo, that's so boring. The younger girl pulled a face. Do you even listen when you attend church, or is your head off in the clouds? I prefer to hum a little Bach under my breath while the venerable Reverend goes on and on. It is true. Big sister. The younger sister shook her head. Her expression was incredulous. You are impossible. Indeed. Excuse me? I apologize if I was on the way, but I have somewhere I need to be. Alright, I'm sorry. Well, run along then. I trust I will be seeing you in due course. A mischievous smile. Miss Lorena? I'm not saying her last name because I cannot pronounce it. The 4th of April, Monday. Ooh. It was Monday, and Lorena found herself occupied with the arduous task of doing the laundry. The housekeeper, Miss Alicia Smith, had stripped a pile of bed sheets from the innumerable unnecessary guest rooms in Bly. These sheets had not been slept in for years, and Lorena doubted they would be put to use in the immediate future. Why then did she have to wash them? To the young maid, it seemed like nothing more than pointless busy work. Miss Smith's orders, however, were absolute. The washing was always done on Mondays. Miss Smith was a stickler for it. It was an unwritten rule at Bly. Perhaps it was not so unwritten after all, because Miss Smith had read about it in Estelle Wood's popular Practical Housekeeping Guide. In any event, Lorena had managed to progress to the 3rd stage of the long, laborious chore. She was boiling the linens in soaping water, stirring them with a wooden stick. Lorena sighed deeply. It didn't make her feel any better. This would be far easier if she had help. But Pauline, who was supposed to aid her, had swan off a good 20 minutes or so ago. Lorena had no idea when, or if she would return. That Pauline, she was always shirking her duties, all the while complaining about how very hard she worked. Lorena would like to give her a taste of her own medicine. If only she could become an avenging Valkyrie. But alas, she was just a maid. She gritted her teeth together. The smell of the boiled linens assaulted her nostrils. It wasn't particularly pleasant. Washing clothes never was. Curse Miss Smith for her draconian rules, and curse Estelle Wood for her stupid Practical Housekeeping Guide, and most of all, curse Pauline for being so incredibly infuriating useless. Lorena's forearms hurt, her forehead beaded with sweat, her hair stuck to her skin. Why was she always charged with the most physically draining of tasks? Maybe it was because she was still the new girl? Maybe it was because of Pauline's underhanded dealings? Maybe it was because Lady Constance didn't like her. Maybe it was a mix of all three. But there was also the rumors to take into account. They couldn't have helped. Perhaps this was supposed to be some sort of punishment. Everyone seemed to know what had transpired between Lorena and the Pickering family, even Lady Constance. And speaking of which, are you enjoying yourself, maid? Shouldn't you be in the drawing room with Miss Amy? Where I go and what I do with my spare time is of no concern to you. I suppose it isn't, no. What you do with your time, however, is a concern of mine. It concerns me greatly. Are you working or are you just standing there? I was taking a short break, miss. My arm started to hurt. Your arms hurt? Oh, how terrible. I am so sorry your arms hurt. This is your job, maid. I have no sympathy for you or your complaints. Lorena could believe that quite easily. Now I must be on my way, but if you think about taking another ill-deserved break, you know what will happen, don't you? I have a vague idea, miss. Good, then you're not as stupid as you look. And with a selfish little smirk, the young mistress turned and picked her way through the rose garden. It looked like she was searching for something. But what? Lorena watched with mild interest, her lips pursed together. Well, like Lady Constance said, it was none of her business, really. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call it quits here, because as you can tell from the game so far, it is just a visual novel. And, you know, if I just play through it, I just don't feel right doing that. Because, I mean, if you're enjoying it, go buy it. Right now, I think it's on sale for like $5. I don't know what it costs full price off the top of my head, though. So, that's it for this. I hope you can check it out. It's Blackberry Honey. It's on Switch, PlayStation, and I'm assuming Steam. Yeah, it's on Steam too. I don't know if it's on Xbox or not. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.